Always a pleasure to welcome back Ann Coulter, the syndicated columnist and the best-selling author of In Trump We Trust, E Pluribus Awesome, and the new Resistance is Futile, How the Trump-Hating Left Has Lost Its Collective Mind. And this column you've written is a great one because it illustrates a problem it's not just happening once or twice, it's happening all the time, that reporters stack up a certain set of facts, leave out an awful lot of other details that would run counter to the narrative, and they create an impression that somebody was just targeted because sometimes she, is African American. And it's ridiculous that this is the kind of stuff that's pumped out by the New York Times.
Yes, this one I thought was especially stunning. I came across this one completely by accident. It wasn't one of the big ones. It wasn't Freddie Gray in Baltimore or Michael Brown in Ferguson. Completely by accident, I come across this story of Antoine Rose in Philadelphia, who was shot by a white police officer. You know, we suddenly are totally into the race of jurors and the policemen. But remember when Trump complained that, or commented that the Mexican judge ruling on one of his cases might not like him because of his immigration policies? Oh, that was so outrageous. Oh my gosh, if millennials have learned nothing else from reading the New York Times from their high schools and colleges, it's that when a trial is coming, all you need to know is the race of the jurors. In any event, that turned out to be irrelevant here. So I read the New York Times article. It's about a kid who was an honor student, took AP classes, did lots of charity work, wrote a poem for his mother, whom he loved, something like, don't look at me that way, or I'm not like that, and oh, so many young black men get shot down. I hope this won't happen to mother. And according to the New York Times, the reason he was shot was a car that was similar to another crime that had been used in a crime a few minutes earlier was stopped by a white police officer. Antoine Rose, along with the other passenger, fled, and the policeman shot the fleeing felon, or suspected felon. So then I look into the case, and it doesn't take much looking. I mean, the New York Times seems to be unaware of this new thing called the Internet. It was all over the Philadelphia papers, and, you know, as usual, you can get the truth from the British press. Among the details left out of the article by the New York Times, the car that Antoine Rose was in, and the reason it was stopped by the police was not just that it was similar to a car used in a drive-by. No, it was provably the car that was used in a drive-by in which two black guys were shot at. Black guys shoot back at this car. 13 minutes later, this car, it was a jitney car, so the driver was driving these two who had the stolen guns. Oh, yes, something else the New York Times neglected to mention. The car had its entire back window shot out. It's not only an unusual car, a gold Chevy Cruze, but it had its window shot out. 10 minutes earlier, about a mile and a half away, the cop stops the car. He's by himself. He follows procedure precisely, asks the driver to get out, take his hands off the steering wheel, lay down on the ground. And as he's doing this, turning to the other two passengers, Antoine and the other passenger bolt. They start running. The cop says he does think that one of them turned to him with a gun, though according to the New York Times, you would know none of this, only that Antoine was an honor student and did charity work and loved his mother. In addition, there were two stolen guns found in the car. The victim, one of the two victims of the drive-by shooting, said that it was Antoine who shot him.
Because they had a beef, right?
Yes, they specifically had a beef. He described it to the policeman. A gun was found under the seat that Antoine was apparently sitting under, the front seat. It looks like the shooting took place from the back seat, but both the driver of the jitney and the guy who was shot at said right before the shooting, he heard the guy in the back seat saying, "Is that him?" Antoine was supposed to be in the front seat. Front seat had a gun under it. Antoine was found with a magazine in his pocket. There was gun residue on his hand. The guy in the back seat did later plead guilty to the drive-by shooting. And this obsession of the New York Times with the racial makeup of the jury, I forget what it was. I think it was nine whites and 3 African Americans. Well, the jury foreman was an African American, and immediately after the verdict, he went out in a number of interviews, ferociously defended the decision, saying this was a felony stop. This was entirely their fault. They ran. There was a nursing home nearby. That's what they're running toward. What if they had run into the nursing home with their guns? Again, the car's back window has been shot out. None of that made it into the New York Times. This is standard operating procedure for the New York Times. We will lie. We will just tell little stories. This is what our readers want to read, and we'll assume that they will not look up any facts about the case that are literally all over the Internet.
And especially when the facts run counter to the narrative. I mean, in a lot of ways, it reminds me, I saw the movie Hurricane about this Hurricane Carter, who was convicted, and then 20 years later they said, it was all about race. Well, I called a friend of mine who was a prosecutor, and he says, you saw the movie? He says, I haven't seen it, but he said, did they mention that, because they left all these things out. They said, yeah, I think it was Denzel Washington who was in it. And he said, did they mention that they found him in the backseat of the car? I said, yeah. He said, did they mention that they caught him with a shotgun? No, they didn't mention that. And that the murder was done with a shotgun a few blocks away? No, they didn't mention that. And he went right through a list of things saying, so they leave all these pieces out of the narrative and say, well, it's just 4 black guys in a car being pulled over by these racist cops for no reason other than their skin color. But they leave all the details out. You mean they caught this innocent man laying down in the footwell of the backseat of a car a few blocks from where a shotgun murder of 2 people had happened, and he happened to have a shotgun with him, but that's pure coincidence. Apparently, even the movie producers decided, well, we better not put that detail in, because everybody's going to walk out of the theater. Same kind of thing, where you just control the narrative, control the facts, and leave people with the impression that it's just another poor black kid being run around because of his skin color.
Well, thank God for the Internet. I mean, at least with that movie, I never saw the movie, at least it's a movie. But here we're talking about the New York Times, the newspaper of record, the old gray lady. Oh my gosh, not anymore. It is just fictional stories that will make its readers happy.
And change an election
to the facts.
And change an election in a year and a half, they think, right?
Perhaps, but I think people will be noticing. They just started the 1619 project, where it's going to be all slavery all the time at the New York Times. They've proved themselves absolute liars on anything at all touching on race. They cannot be trusted. They are liars. They are demagogues. Like I say, this was an obscure story. It wasn't even one of their hair on fire. We need to bring out Black Lives Matter and get a bunch of Dallas cops shot. This was just one random case, and they can't tell the truth about that?
You would think that even the individual reporters would say, "Boss, I got to put these other details in here." They go right to the heart of the story. No, put the poem in. Leave out the stuff about the magazine and the gunshot residue and the spent round or full round in his pocket. Leave all that stuff out. The audience doesn't need. They want to see Antoine's poem. And it's a great column. I got to highly recommend all of your columns to my audience. But love having you on the program, and thanks so much.
Good to talk to you, Lars. Bye-bye.
Nice to talk to you as well. That is Ann. You got to read this column because it comes right home to you that there is some truly fraudulent journalism. And this goes to what I told a caller earlier today when he said, don't call it fake news, it's a lie. I said, no, you can tell the truth, but if you leave out selective facts, you will leave somebody with an impression that is, in fact, not accurate. You're listening to The Lars Larson Show.